Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Treasury of Constantinople. This week we'll talk about the monetary reform of Emperor Alexius I in 1092. This video will have 3 parts. We'll first do a quick recap of the previous major reform, Anastasius's Reform, and have a look at the major developments in Byzantine coinage between Anastasius and Alexius. Then we'll see Alexius's pre-reform coins, talk about the reform itself, and see Alexius's post-reform coins. In the last part, we'll look at what happened to Byzantine coinage after Alexius and all the way until the fall of Constantinople. If the only part you care about is Alexius's reform, you can use the timestamps in the description to get to that section. So without further ado, let's get into it. The reason why Anastasius had to change the coinage system in the first place was because aside from the gold solidus and its little sisters, the semesis and tremisis, there was practically nothing else being minted except for little Numian bronze coins. Individual Numian were essentially worthless, since you needed several of them to buy a single loaf of bread. This led to the curious practice before and during the early reign of Anastasius of paying in bags of coins, which is probably why the new denomination was called phallus, bag, and why one phallus was worth 40 numia. Note that, yes, technically there were also silver coins floating around at this time, notably the heavy milliarents, the light milliarents, and the siliqua. These coins, however, were minted in very, very small quantities, possibly only as ceremonial issues and so were not used on a day-to-day basis. We will therefore ignore them for now. It's important to note that unlike Alexius's reform, Anastasius's reform only concerned the bronze coinage, so the previously mentioned solidus, also called nomisma, in place since the time of Constantine the Great, as well as its fractions, wasn't affected by the reform. Likewise, the silver milliarensa and siliqua, also introduced a century earlier by our Constantine, who was great, continued being minted without any changes, though in considerably smaller quantities than gold coins and not by all emperors. The denominations introduced by Anastasius were the phallis, as mentioned, worth 40 numia, the half phallus, worth 20 numia, the decanumion worth, as the name indicates, 10 numia, and the pentanumion worth 5 numia. Individual Numian coins continued being minted for the time being. It's important to keep in mind that 600 years passed between Anastasius's reform in the late 5th century and Alexius's reform in the late 11th century. Naturally, Byzantine bureaucrats were not asleep this whole time, and in fact plenty of small reforms were passed, new denominations were introduced, existing denominations taken out of circulation, the relative values and exchange rates between gold and copper coins changed, etc., etc. So let's now have a look at the major numismatic changes that happened between Anastasius and Alexius, first regarding the denominations, then the design, then the size of the coins, and finally the mints. We start in the reign of Anastasius, with the familiar gold solidus, semises and tremises, the heavy and light milliarents, and the siliqua, as well as the bronze phallus, half phallus, decanumion, pentanumion, and numion. Before we continue, I'd like to note that the Byzantine Empire wasn't really big into making silver coins. As mentioned, not all emperors minted them. Moreover, their names, milliarensae and siliqua, were applied to coins of vastly different sizes and weights. Their designs were all over the place, and their value in relation to the solidus isn't always terribly clear. Fractions of these coins, especially the siliqua, also existed, like the half, third, and quarter siliquae. Because of this, and also because this video is supposed to be about Alexius's reform, I decided to use a star silver coin to represent all those random little silver coins the gold workshops minted when they had silver around and enough free time. Whenever real denominations of silver come up, I'll mention them. The major trend that we see in the first 100 years or so is the progressive disappearance of the smaller denominations. The most worthless of the lot is without a doubt the Numian, and so it is no surprise that it was the first to go. The last individual Numian were minted by Justinian I. During Tiberius II's short reign, a 3/4 phallus was introduced. Then Heraclius introduced a silver coin, commonly called hexagram, short for 2 hexagram. It was worth 1/12 of a solidus. Heraclius was also the last emperor to consistently mint the pentanumian. Note that a few more emperors minted pentanumia afterwards, but only sporadically and in tiny quantities. Constantine IV, Heraclius's great-grandson, was the last to consistently mint the decanumian. Then, his son, Justinian II, was the last emperor to mint the three-quarter follis. The half-follis disappeared during the 30 Years' Anarchy. Although many emperors tried to reintroduce it later, it never caught on again. Leo III in the 8th century introduced a new milliaresion that substituted the hexagram. The last emperor to consistently mint semises and trimises was also Leo III. After him, these coins were rarely struck, most likely only for ceremonial purposes. In the 9th century, Theophilus started minting flat coins in Kherson. Interestingly, these coins were cast, not struck. From the reign of Basil I on, follis were no longer marked with M, while semises and tremises completely disappeared. Nicephorus II in the 10th century introduced the gold tetarteron. This coin was 1/12 lighter than the nomisma, but otherwise indistinguishable from it. Even their designs were exactly the same. Then, just before the turn of the millennium, John I started a trend of minting follis with the bust of Christ and a Christian legend, without any reference to the reigning emperor. These are called nowadays anonymous follies. Note that this is not a different denomination, just a sudden drastic change in the design of the follies. In the meantime, during the reigns of the next few emperors, the gold tetarteron got progressively smaller and thicker, while the numisma got larger and thinner. Their designs also got more and more different. From the reign of Constantine X on, emperors started minting named follis again, while continuing to mint anonymous follies. And that's it. 3 emperors later, and we come to Alexius. An in-depth analysis of the evolution of the stylistic characteristics of Byzantine coins is definitely beyond the scope of this video, but let's just say that the design of coins changed a lot between Anastasius and Alexius, going from looking Roman to less Roman to Byzantine to more Byzantine. You can see it here in more or less 100-year intervals for the bronze coins. Then, gold coins. And finally, silver coins. Regarding the change in the size of the coins, we know that the solidus was the pillar of the Byzantine economy, so its size and purity remained constant at 24 carats, so 4.5 grams and more or less 20 millimeters in diameter. That's all the way back since the time of Constantine the Great in the 4th century. When Nicephorus II introduced the gold tetarteron, the solidus, called at the time nomisma, still had the same size and weight. As we mentioned, though, during the reigns of the following emperors, the nomisma got progressively thinner and wider, reaching the diameter of 27 millimeters. Note that it still weighed around 4.5 grams. This would have been all good if those 4.5 grams were 24 carats of gold, but they weren't. Michael IV began the process of debasing the nomisma. Now, debasing silver and bronze coins is reprehensible but forgivable. Debasing gold coins is not, especially when your economy is based on trade and your gold coins are universally accepted as international currency. We'll have a look at the crimes committed against the Byzantine economy by Michael IV and his successors in the next section. But for now, let's move on to the size of the bronze coins. I'll focus on the follies, not the smaller denominations, as they disappeared very quickly. So for most of the 6th century, the follis was very large, with most being larger than 28 millimeters. The 7th century was a very turbulent time, with Phocas usurping the throne of Maurus Tiberius, then Heraclius taking the head of Phocas, then having to deal with the Muslims, and finally the 30 Years' Anarchy. Many follies from this century are small and in bad shape, but certainly not all. For example, there is no shortage of large Heraclean follies. Likewise, there are plenty of follies from Constans II over 27 millimeters. Most are from the Mint in Syracuse, but there are also some from Constantinople. Constan's son and successor Constantine IV, who ruled in the second half of the 7th century, also minted quite large follies. Things got more stable in the 8th century after the end of the 30 Years' Anarchy, and the size of the follies settled around 25 millimeters, with some being smaller than that. In the 9th century, Michael II and his son Theophilus increased the size of the follis to 27 millimeters, with some getting as big as 30. In the 10th century, John I radically changed the design of the follis to what we now call anonymous follis. His class A1 type is relatively small at 23 to 25 millimeters, but his successor Basil II increased the size to around 28 to 30 millimeters, with some being as big as 35. Anonymous follies classes, a 2 through F, are all quite large, usually above 27 millimeters. Romanus IV's class G measures 24 to 28 millimeters, then it really starts going down, with Michael VII's class H and Nicephorus III's class I usually measuring around 27 millimeters or less, and definitely thinner than previous types. Alexius's follis, anonymous or not, all are quite small, 25 millimeters or less. Regarding the mints, we made a full video about that before. You can find the link in the description, but the short version is that the number of mints increased from 4 during the reign of Anastasius to 11 by the time of Maurice Tiberius. There were also quite a few secondary mints. From Heraclius on, though, the number of mints decreased sharply from 11 to 8 to 5 to 2 to 1. Alexius reopened the mint of Thessalonica. Alexius came to the throne in 1081, and his reform was in 1092, 11 years later, so there are pre-reform and post-reform coins from the reign of Alexius. Regarding pre-reform coins, we have bronze anonymous follies classes J and K, both minted in Constantinople, and 4 types of named follis, probably all coming from Thessalonica. For silver, we have the milliaregion and its fractions, the half and third milliaregion. And for gold, we have the reason a coinage reform was needed. If you remember, I mentioned that Michael IV began the process of debasing the nomisma and tetartaron. The nomisma was originally 24 carats, but by the time of Constantine IX it was down to 21 carats. Constantine X debased it further to 18, then Romanus IV to 16 carats, and Michael VII to 14 carats, which is just a bit above 50% gold. Nicephorus III went on to reduce the gold content to 8 carats or 33% gold. The first 10 years of Alexius's reign saw those 8 carats go down to 0, thus the need for the reform. Here we have Alexius's pre-reform not gold coins, often affectionately called electrum histamenon nomisma and electrum tetartaron. Alexius's reform involved first and foremost abolishing the sad-looking histamenon and tetartaron and replacing them with a new denomination, the hyperparon, meaning super refined. Alexius's hyperparon was theoretically pure gold, but in reality around 21 carats. See, our Alexius went on to mint some 10 million hyperpara before the end of his reign, and most, if not all of the gold used to mint said hyperpara came from melting down old gold coins, including debased ones, as those abominations had no reason to remain in circulation. They did their best to super refine them, but I guess at some point they must have thought that good enough was good enough, and so 21 carats it was. Yeah. The silver milliaregion and fractions were also abolished, but the new coinage system did not include any silver coins. Instead, 2 new denominations were introduced. The electrum aspirin trachea had 6 carats of gold and was worth 1/3 of a hyperparon, while the bilon aspirin trachea was 8% silver and worth 1/48 of a hyperparon. It's interesting to note that both electrum and bilon only became official units of account after Alexius's reform. Finally, the follis was replaced by 2 new denominations as well, the bronze tetartaron and half tetartaron. So, to recap, before the reform, we had the debased into silver histamenon and tetartaron, the actual silver milliaregion and fractions, and the follis, anonymous and named. After the reform, we got the beautiful hyperparon, equally beautiful electrum and bilon aspirin tracheas, and the nice little bronze tetartaron and half tetartaron. Alexius's descendants didn't make any changes to his coinage reform, and continued minting gold hyperparon, electrum, and bilon tracheas, as well as bronze tetartaron and half tetartaron. The sizes and purities didn't change either, with the notable exception of the bilon trachea, whose silver content decreased considerably. 100 years later, on the eve of the Fourth Crusade, the same coins were still being minted with a similar design and style. Then the Fourth Crusade happened, our beautiful Constantinople was sacked and set on fire, and the Byzantine elite, together with about 75% of the population of the city, fled, gathering for the most part in Nicaea. For the next 60 years, that's where everyone stayed, and clearly among those that fled were the workers of the Mint of Constantinople. A new mint was set up in Nicaea in 1208 and then moved to Magnesia in 1214. The coins minted remained the same, with the notable addition of silver and bronze trachees. Meanwhile, the Latin rulers of Constantinople didn't have any gold or silver left after paying the Venetians. They also didn't have any copper left, so after committing crimes against humanity and destroying the city of Constantinople, they proceeded to commit crimes against heritage by melting ancient bronze statues to make bronze coins. The only denomination minted by the Latin rulers was the bronze trachea. Back to the Byzantine Empire. In 1261, Michael VIII Palaiologos returned to Constantinople in glory. The capital of the empire was restored, the people moved back, and the mint moved back too. The Byzantine Empire would stay in the capable and then not so capable hands of the Palaiologos family until the fall of Constantinople some 200 years later. Things initially went well, and the empire saw a bit of a renaissance. In terms of coinage, we still had the gold hyperparin, still large and beautiful, though only 15 carats by this time, as well as silver and bronze trochees, and some sad-looking tetartaron. The existence of the bronze trachea made the tetartaron redundant, and so it slowly disappeared. As the economy got worse and worse, the gold content of the hyperparin was reduced over and over again, until the empire was no longer able to mint them at all. The last Byzantine gold coins were minted during the reign of John VI in the 1350s. The reduction in the production of gold coins led to the emergence of silver as the preferred medium of exchange. The silver trochees that had been floating around for a while were slowly replaced by new silver denominations during the 14th century, like the basilicon, a direct imitation of the Venetian grosso, and the tournées, a coin similar to the famous denier tournoi used by the Frankish Crusader states as well as some Italo-Norman kingdoms. Later, another silver denomination, the stavraton, came into circulation. This was the largest and heaviest silver coin in Europe at the time, measuring 25 millimeters and weighing 8.5 grams. The bronze trachees, too, were replaced very slowly by new bronze denominations, among them the Asarion, the Stamenon, the Phalero, and the bronze tournées. Constantine XI was the last Byzantine emperor. These are the coins he minted during his short 4-year reign. Despite their terrible appearance, they are actually almost pure silver. Unfortunately, that silver probably came from melting down church ornaments. And that's it for this one. If we made any mistakes or missed anything important about this topic, please leave a nicely worded comment below. Have a nice morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video. And I hope to see you next time. Also, if you like collecting coins, or know someone who does, feel free to check out Adelaide's eBay store, The Spanish Galleon. We're also on Instagram, links in the description.